There was something strange and scary about the Queen's eyes. And I immediately knew something was wrong the moment I met her eyes. It was market day, and I was walking back home, past the palace in the heart of the village. The path was crowded, people hurrying, merchants calling out their goods. But through the noise, I felt something watching me. I looked up, and there she was. Queen Nyasha, sitting in her palanquin. Her face was hidden behind the golden veil, but her eyes, I still remember them. Dark, empty, and cold. Everyone else kept moving, bowing their heads, but I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, unable to look away. It felt like she was staring straight into my soul, peeling it apart. Then, without a word, her palanquin moved on. But I knew. I just knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her eyes. How they followed me, even when I closed mine. My grandmother always said, the Queen isn't what she seems. I never understood what she meant until that day. In the middle of the night, I heard footsteps outside my hut. Slow, dragging footsteps. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I didn't dare move, didn't even breathe. But whoever it was, they stopped just outside my door. I could hear them breathing, like some wild animal, panting and low. Then, the knocking started. 3 slow knocks. Thud, thud, thud. I was too scared to open the door. Who would be out there at this hour? I waited, but the knocking came again, louder this time. Asterisk thud, thud. Thud, asterisk. And then, silence. I didn't sleep at all that night. I waited until the first light of dawn before creeping outside. Nothing. Just the empty village square. But on my door, carved deep into the wood, was a strange symbol. It wasn't there before. I ran to my grandmother's house. The moment she saw the mark, she went pale. She dragged me inside, shut the door, and whispered, "You've been marked by the Queen." Her voice trembled. "She's chosen you." I didn't understand. Chosen for what? But my grandmother wouldn't explain. She only said, "We need to leave." The night of the drums. We didn't leave fast enough. That night, after we had packed, the drums started. In the village, drums are normal. There's always some celebration or ceremony. But these drums, they were different. They came from the palace, heavy and slow, like they were calling something ancient. Something dangerous. My grandmother grabbed my hand. "Don't look outside," she warned. "Whatever you hear, do not look." But it was impossible not to. The sound crawled into my skin, rattled my bones. It made me feel like something terrible was coming closer with every beat. Boom, boom, boom. Then the voices started. Not human voices. They were whispering, low and eerie, like the wind itself was speaking. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it made my blood turn to ice. My grandmother lit a candle and placed it in the middle of the floor, her hands shaking. "They're coming for you," she whispered. Before I could ask who they were, the door rattled. A loud bang shook the walls. I jumped, heart racing. The banging grew louder, like something was trying to break in. I wanted to scream, but my grandmother held a finger to her lips. "Stay still," she mouthed. Asterisk bam. Bam, bam, asterisk. Then, silence. I thought it was over. But then I heard it. A voice from outside. A woman's voice, soft and sweet, like honey dripping from a spoon. "Come outside," it said. "I've been waiting for you." It was the Queen. I wanted to move, to hide, but I couldn't. My body felt paralyzed, like something invisible was holding me in place. My grandmother kept shaking her head, her face full of fear. But I couldn't stop myself. My feet moved toward the door, like they were being pulled by strings. I tried to resist, but it was useless. The Queen's voice grew louder. "Come. I'm waiting." I reached the door and grabbed the handle. My heart was screaming at me not to open it, but my hand moved on its own. Slowly, I turned the knob. But before I could pull the door open, my grandmother shouted something in our village's old tongue. The candle in the middle of the room flared up, and suddenly, I could move again. I slammed the door shut and fell back, gasping for breath. Outside, the Queen's voice turned cold, furious. "You can't hide forever," she hissed. "I'll find you." The Queen's curse. The next morning, we knew we couldn't stay. The mark on my door was still there, glowing faintly in the early light. My grandmother said it was the Queen's curse, a mark that couldn't be removed. We packed our things and left the village before dawn, heading deep into the forest where no one went. My grandmother said it was the only place safe from the Queen's reach. But as we walked, I could feel something watching us. The trees were too quiet. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of our footsteps crunching through the leaves. Then, I heard it again. The Queen's voice. "You can't escape," she whispered from somewhere in the trees. "You're mine." I spun around, but there was no one there. My grandmother urged me to keep walking, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. The further we went, the heavier the air became. It was like the forest itself was alive, closing in on us. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled, and the next thing I knew, I was falling into a deep pit. My grandmother screamed my name, but it was too late. I hit the bottom, hard. My body ached, but I was alive. I looked up and saw the sky far above me, a narrow circle of light. But then, something moved in the darkness. I wasn't alone. There, at the far end of the pit, I saw her. Queen Nyasha. Her veil was gone, revealing a face that wasn't human. Her skin was pale, too pale, and her eyes, those empty, black eyes, stared at me with a hunger I had never seen before. "You should have come when I called," she said, her voice echoing through the pit. "Now it's too late." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I could feel her pulling me toward her, even though she didn't move. My body was no longer mine. "You belong to me now," she whispered, her eyes gleaming with a wicked smile. That's when I woke up, covered in sweat, the mark still glowing on my door. I don't know how long I have left, but I know one thing for sure. The Queen is coming, and there's nowhere left to run.